Have you ever wondered exactly how sugar hijacks your brain? Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're exploring a substance that is practically inescapable. Its inner celebrations, our morning coffees, and hidden inside almost every packaged food lining the grocery store aisles. I'm talking about sugar, that sweet white gold that so often feels absolutely impossible to resist. We all know we probably shouldn't eat too much of it, yet we continuously find ourselves coming back for more. But why? Is it really just a lack of willpower, or is there something far more complex and biological happening inside our heads? Well, today we're going to unravel this mystery and look closely at the science to understand exactly how sugar hijacks your brain.
Okay, let's dive into this. I want you to think about the last time you saw a fresh donut, still warm from the bakery, or maybe a perfectly wrapped chocolate bar with that rich, glossy sheen. Think about that powerful, almost magnetic grip it had on your willpower. You might have told yourself you'd only have a little bit, maybe just a bite, right? But suddenly you're staring at an empty wrapper. To understand why that happens, why we can go from 0 to 60 in the presence of sweets, we really have to look past our stomachs and directly into our brain chemistry.
To set a baseline for our biology, let's look at the actual recommendations. The World Health Organization clearly states that the recommended maximum amount of added sugar per day for adults is 50 grams. To put that into perspective, that's roughly the equivalent of about 12 teaspoons. Now, that sounds like a fair, manageable amount on paper, but in the context of modern processed food, it's startlingly easy to surpass. In fact, a single can of regular soda can easily wipe out this entire 50-gram allowance before you even hit lunch. Now, contrast that recommended 50 grams with the reality of our modern diets. Research highlights that the average Briton consumes a staggering 238 teaspoons of sugar each week. Think about that for a second. That's literally the equivalent of eating a 1-kilogram bag of sugar every single week. It translates to an enormous overconsumption problem on a massive scale. We are eating sugar in quantities that our bodies, and more importantly, our brains, were just never designed to handle. So to understand why we crave it so intensely, we kind of have to travel back in time. In neuroscience, food is categorized as a natural reward. Evolution built what's called the mesolimbic pathway in our brains to ensure we survive. When our ancestors were out there scavenging for their next meal, this pathway taught them a very simple life-saving algorithm. Sour meant a fruit was unripe, bitter meant it was likely poisonous, but sweet meant a safe, dense, and healthy source of carbohydrates. Our brains literally evolved to aggressively prefer sweet things because, historically, they are exactly what kept us alive in a really harsh world. Fast forward to today, and that ancient survival mechanism is working in absolute overdrive. And here is the wildest part. A fascinating study from the Max Planck Institute for Metabolism Research showed that our brains reward us instantly when we eat sugar. The dopamine release happens the very second sugar hits your tongue, before the food even travels down your esophagus to your stomach. Your brain provides an immediate chemical reward, reinforcing the behavior right on the spot. This is exactly why just tasting something sweet can instantly turn around a bad mood or give you that quick afternoon jolt. But the response doesn't stop in the mouth. Recent research from the Monell Chemical Senses Center reveals that we have specialized nerve cells in our gut that act as a direct hotline to the brain via the vagus nerve. There are basically two distinct parallel pathways firing here. One route strictly tracks sugars, and the other strictly tracks fats. And this intricate communication happens entirely below our level of consciousness. That means your gut is sending massive reward signals up to your brain without you even actively realizing it's happening. Now, what's really interesting about this is what happens when these two pathways interact. It's truly fascinating. When we eat highly processed foods like ice cream, cookies, or cake, we are consuming a combination of fats and sugars that rarely, if ever, exist together in nature. According to Dr. Guillaume de Lartigue, activating both the fat and sugar circuits creates a powerful synergy. Even if the total calories are exactly the same, combining fat and sugar triggers a massive, heightened release of dopamine. This combination literally reprograms our innate motivation, making these foods practically irresistible and driving us to overeat. This intense dopamine response naturally brings up a pretty heavy word: addiction. And there is compelling evidence to support this idea. In animal models, scientists have observed the 4 classic components of addiction when rats are introduced to sugar. First, they binge furiously on sugary solutions. Then, when it's taken away, they suffer genuine physical withdrawal. Third, they exhibit intense craving and impulsivity, desperate to get it back. And fourth, cross-sensitization occurs, meaning rats who become dependent on sugar are actually more predisposed to becoming dependent on drugs like cocaine or opiates later on. Let's look at the actual brain architecture behind this. Over time, heavy sugar consumption physically changes the brain's dopamine receptors. It increases the concentration of D1 receptors, which are excitatory, and it decreases D2 receptors, which are inhibitory. So, what does that actually mean for you on a Tuesday afternoon staring into the pantry? Well, think of it like turning down the volume knob on your brain's pleasure center. Because the volume is lower, you build a tolerance. You have to eat more and more sugar just to hear the music, to activate those reward pathways and achieve that same initial sugar high. And when that tolerance is abruptly interrupted, the physical toll is incredibly real. In studies where rats are put into a state of sugar withdrawal, the physical reactions are shockingly severe. The animals experience teeth chattering, paw tremors, and head shaking. They also show profound signs of anxiety and depression, such as feelings of helplessness and highly impulsive behavior when they're eventually re-exposed to sugar cues. It looks, for all intents and purposes, exactly like drug withdrawal. So the crucial point is, does this mean sugar is functionally the same as a hard drug? Is it truly as addictive as cocaine or heroin? A comprehensive review from Cambridge University urges us to pump the brakes before making that leap. They suggest that the straightforward sugar is a drug narrative might be far too simplistic, and that we need to look a bit closer at how these studies are actually conducted in the lab. If we put sugar and cocaine side by side, critical differences start to emerge. First, let's look at the dopamine response. With sugar, the brain's dopamine spike habituates, or fades rapidly over time, just like it does with any normal food you get used to eating. With cocaine, though, the dopamine response never habituates. It surges every single time. Next, look at motivation. If scientists make sugar taste bitter, rats will immediately stop eating it. But with cocaine, animals will continue to seek the drug despite severe negative consequences. Finally, the trigger itself. Cocaine is chemically addictive on its own. Sugar, however, only triggers addiction-like behaviors under very specific conditions. And this brilliantly illustrates the nuance of the science. Researchers found that rats only display addiction-like behaviors, such as binging and withdrawal, when they are subjected to unpredictable, intermittent access to sugar. When those same rats are given 24-hour, free, unrestricted access to sugar, they regulate their caloric intake perfectly fine. They don't binge, and they don't develop neurochemical dependencies. This is incredibly important for anyone who has ever been on a strict diet. It is the restriction, the pattern of starvation followed by a massive cheat day, that actually creates the addictive behavior, not necessarily the sugar itself. We have to remember our fundamental biology here. As the brain doc so perfectly summarized, your brain runs on sugar. It's how it gets that sugar that's the problem, not the food group itself. Our bodies biologically require glucose to function. It is our absolute primary energy source for thinking, moving, and just living. So demonizing the nutrient itself completely misses the mark. The real culprit is the modern delivery system. The highly processed, fiber-stripped, fat and sugar combinations engineered in factories to bypass our natural fullness cues and hijack our evolutionary wiring. Which leaves us with this final, vital question to ponder. Are we really addicted to sugar? Or are we just biologically vulnerable to highly processed, unpredictable food environments? If intermittent restriction fuels the binge, maybe the key to reclaiming our brain's reward system isn't total deprivation. Instead, it's about rethinking our relationship with our food environment, understanding our gut-brain connections, and finally stepping off the roller coaster of strict dieting. As we've seen today, it's not just about willpower. It's about how sugar hijacks your brain through the environment we build around it. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Now go out there and make informed choices.